I'm going to have to do this without the PowerPoint, which is a pity because I had some really nice images and some really nice stuff, so you have to bear with me a little bit. This is kind of an open discussion, so if there's questions at any point, just ask away. There's no problem there. What I'm going to talk about today is esoteric ingredients and kind of why they're important to me and why I think they're important for the cocktail industry as a whole. I have a bar called 69 Colbert Row up in Angel, Islington, which I'm sure some of you know. I know you lot do. And we have a laboratory upstairs. Well, not upstairs, it's moved around the corner now, but we've had a laboratory upstairs for 2 years. And what we do is do a lot of research and development into new ingredients and new ways of using those ingredients, but also of integrating them into drinks using different processes, some of which we'll talk about today. Drink Factory is the name of the lab. You can go to the website and you see a lot of our ideas up there. It's a big exchange of ideas with a lot of people we know, from food scientists to perfumers, etc., etc. So if you're ever interested about, kind of stuff that we do, or I've been talking about today, just go onto the Drink Factory website. There's lots of interviews and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is start off with an ingredient that I found in two different places. One was the perfume industry, and the other was at a cognac house. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand out these. If we could pass them around, just smell them, and then keep passing them around. If we go down the middle as well. So this is cassis bud. So it's the bud from cassis plant from the blackcurrant tree. It's fairly unpleasant, really. You guys have smelt it, but once it gets back there, it'll be fairly unpleasant for you guys too. So one of the reasons I kind of want you to smell this is because I think it's quite an important ingredient, because a lot of the time when we look at drinks and we make drinks, we're always looking for that perfect pitch and that perfect resonance between ingredients and how those ingredients work. Now, if you kind of compare that to the perfume industry, in the perfume industry, you have ingredients that smell absolutely disgusting and would probably taste even worse. Now, what that allows the perfume industry to do is allows them to create different levels of notes and depth of notes. So, for example, if you use cassis bud in a perfume underneath a floral note, what you get is a deep resonance from the bottom end of the floral note. Do you see? Does that make sense? At the back, does that make sense? I'm just checking that we're communicating. So, looking at ingredients like that, I think is very important, because then what we can do is we can take cocktails apart and we can layer them in lots of different stages. The way we look at cocktails a lot of time at 69 is to look at them as if they are on a, which I would show you now, the photo, almost like a perfume triangle. So you've got the top notes at the top, which are the light notes. The equivalent in the cocktail industry, I suppose, would be citrus notes, light floral notes, and notes like that. Notes that evaporate really quickly. The first things you smell. The second set of notes would be the deeper flowers, some of the resins, and some of the lighter woods, maybe. Mid-tier. Then we have the deep, heavy resins, the animalics, the really heavy, woody, deep woody notes. So that would be the bottom tier. Now, if you translate that triangle onto looking at cocktails and see how that works with cocktails, what you start to see is the same kind of things that you see in perfumery, which are, there are certain notes that always hit your flavour palette, your aroma palette, at certain periods before others. So we can basically scrap the tongue map and look at it in a completely different way. When you put perfume on your skin, what happens? Evaporates. What evaporates first? Alcohol, the really finite alcohols. Then what do you start to smell? Fragrance. Yeah, but what parts of the fragrance do you smell? the lighter notes, so the citrusy notes, the more delicate notes. Why is that? Does anyone know? More volatile oils. They're smaller molecules. Well, most of the time they're smaller molecules. So they are the things that evaporate off your skin first. The second ones, again, are the kind of slightly deeper flowers, the slightly heavier notes, going all the way down until after about 6 to 8 hours, what you have left on your skin is the deep, heavy, resinous, woody notes, because they're the heaviest notes. If you look at how your tongue works and how you actually taste, it's nothing to do with sweet, sour, umami, whatever. It's the size of the molecules and how you taste them. So, why do we taste sugar first? Because sugar's one of the biggest molecules. Because your brain is hardwired to find sugar. None of us can survive without sugar, so we look for that first, which is why we taste it first. Then we start to taste the kind of lighter citrusy notes, which would be the juices, the citrus juices. Then we start to get the heavier notes, and what do we get at the end? We get the bitter notes. 2 reasons. Big molecules, not safe. When we were all cavemen, well, not personally, but when we were cavemen, what used to happen is, you know, you didn't go down to your supermarket and go, oh, that's a lovely piece of fruit, I'm going to kind of buy that, eat it. You kind of walked up to, you know, your local forest, went, oh, that looks nice, eat, die, or live. And it was only through a process of elimination that, you know, people didn't kill themselves every time they went out to eat something. Make sense? So the bigger molecules, the bitter molecules, the alkalis are the ones that are poisonous. Why do they reach the back of your throat? So you vomit. Because if it's poison, you want it out of your system. Yeah? So if you look at those kind of structures and then apply them again to cocktails, then you start to see there's 2 things there. There's 2 layers going on. There's one, which is, you know, how the molecules actually work, and then how your brain works in conjunction with those molecules. All with me? Cool. So, wouldn't an ingredient like cassis bud, you wouldn't actually go out and eat cassis bud. It's not the kind of, your nose is not telling you, oh, I really want to eat that. But if you add it to something that's floral, it gives it that depth in the drink and can give it something really beautiful in that drink. So what I'm kind of trying to say is there are ingredients out there that aren't necessarily pleasant on the palate or on the nose, but are actually safe, which can be used to enhance how you make a cocktail. With one of the drinks we have at 69, it's called a Gonzales, and we use a hydrosol called tuberose, which is a very heavy, very rich kind of version of jasmine. And what that does is, in its tiniest proportion, we literally put microns of this in a bottle of tequila. What it does is gives the whole drink an extra dimension, an extra depth. If you use the cassis bud, it does the same thing. You don't necessarily register it as sulfurous cat's piss. What you register it as is, oh, there's a really low depth there. And what you're doing is playing around with the perception in your brain of how the molecules work inside you. Cool. That's cassis bud. Do we like it? Do we smell it at the back? Cool. What we're going to taste now is this. Right, those of you that have tasted this before, please don't tell the others what it is. If we could pass this down. We might have to share it because I think it's quite a lot of you. Right, if you could smell this and then taste it, and then let me know what A, what you smell, and B, what you taste. So any thoughts on smell so far? You guys, anything? Any smell? No. Okay. In the middle, any smell at all? Any flavour? No? Smell, flavour? Not really. Now if you taste it, what happens? some kind of sweetness? It's dryness in your mouth. Anything at the back? Underripe hazelnuts. Anything else? No? What that is water with with a distillation of grape tannins. So it's tannins and polyphenols, which you find in wine, you find in teas, and what they do is they shrink the protein chains, the amino acid, in your saliva to a third of the size that they usually are, making that kind of slight dry feeling. Is anyone getting a dry feeling? Now, if you couple that, that's not actually a taste or a smell. If you couple that, that's an effect. Now, if you couple that with other ingredients, what that does is, A, strips your tongue of saliva. To taste, you need saliva. The fresher the saliva in your mouth, the better you taste. So if you're stripping yourself of saliva, your brain is then being told, I need to produce more saliva. Because of the dryness, you produce new saliva, which means you can taste better. So imagine if you add that to a drink. What you're doing is adding another layer to it that's not flavour, or it's just effect. So you have another set of ingredients out there in the world that don't have any taste or flavour, but will have a really profound effect on a drink. Can you imagine taking like the tannins and polyphenols out of red wines and how boring red wines would be without them? You know, they give them the depth, they give them all of that kind of, you know, longevity, that big finish. We use this in a dry martini, obviously enough. And it also kind of creates taste loops. Because if you think you're taking a sip of a drink, and this is what happens with our dry martini, it creates a taste loop because you're stripping your tongue of saliva, you're producing more saliva, you're taking another sip, and you're starting that process over and over again. So by the end of it, your tongue should kind of like literally be, as any good aperitif is, ready for food or ready for something to, you know, more flavours at the end. All okay? See a few nods. Okay, now we're going to go to something else. This isn't marijuana, by the way. Okay, this is going to take quite a while because this is the only bit I have with me. This is ambergris. Does anyone know what ambergris is? It's not a sperm whale. Yeah, it's basically like a whale fur ball. And what the whale does, it has an irritation in its gullet. It spits it out into the sea as a ball. It's kind of this grey colour, sorry for the visuals. That floats on the sea for up to 10 years. It looks like a tar ball when it first comes out, but over the years it starts to dry out and then it kind of goes a grey colour. This is another ingredient that was used in perfumery a lot back in the day. It's enormously expensive, so please don't steal it. Nowadays, you can't actually harvest it, you can't actually get it, you have to wait for it to wash up on the shore, which is why it's made it more expensive. They don't use it in perfumery anymore. But, again, it's one of those ingredients, this is an animalic, if you use the kind of perfumery term for it. It smells animalic. Where are we at with it? Yeah, cool. So it's heavy, musty, sweaty, you know, quite pungent. Again, not necessarily the first thing that would come to mind to put in your mouth. But we found a recipe from Marcel Proust, which uses hot chocolate, ambergris, and a splash of cognac. And it's probably one of the sexiest drinks I've ever tried. I mean, it's phenomenal. Also, Dave Wonderich found us a recipe for a punch that uses ambergris. Ambergris was used by, by chefs, by people kind of preparing food and sometimes drinks later on to, give a very sensual, sexual note to their drinks. Something that we don't necessarily do nowadays. Well, one second, I should finish this. Looking at the sexuality of drinks, what does that mean? We have a funkiness, we have this, that, the other, but what about adding these new ingredients to it? Obviously check them out. Right, 2 questions. Sorry, 1 second. Do we have a... Hello? There you go. No. They basically took ambergris out because of the whaling laws, because people were killing sperm whales to get them. But they don't do. They've got substitutes now, of which I've got about 10, but they're really horrible and they don't work. They only work in perfumery.
Does it add a flavour or is it just the original?
Both. It has an enormous... I don't know who's got it now. Someone's run off with it. Yeah.
Is it a strawberry one?
It's funny because it's quite a big flavour, so it ends up right at the back of your throat, but then you get this huge retronasal hit that's very, very, very sensual. We actually we made this drink, this Proust drink, at the bar one day, and we had to beat all the kind of bartenders to keep off each other and the waitresses and that. It was very... So, were you there? Oh no. Yeah. Yeah, it's, some of these ingredients don't necessarily it hits you a minor note on the palate, but a massive note on the back, which can also enhance what a drink is. Okay. If you can just take a few grains of this and taste those. This is pollen. It's actually Transylvanian pollen, made by a priest in Transylvania. Well, he doesn't make it, his bees do. What do you think of that? It's kind of sweet, but it's kind of dry and it's kind of a little bit musty. It's really interesting, I find. Yeah, quite floral as well. Yeah, I mean, add this to honey, back to honey, and it gives honey an enormous depth. Add that to tequila, it just absolutely explodes off the planet. It's fantastic. And again, you can make a pollen liqueur from this. You can make a syrup. You can make all kinds of ingredients.
What you can make with tequila?
What we did is make a pollen liqueur and just stirred it down with tequila. Just really simple. If you use Polish spirit and then water and then sugar, yeah. So you make it. You're literally making a liqueur with it. Yeah. There's another drink we use this in as well. That's based on the drink from the Roman orgies that we found. And what you do is you use young wine, mastic, chamomile, pollen, and it's pretty true to the recipe. The recipe was actually called a dog's bollocks. I wonder why. And that's just going on our menu in a few weeks actually. And what you do is you make a concentrate, cook that down, add a bit of honey, chamomile and stuff like that. So you've got all these different layers with the mastic and the pollen. And then you re-add it to young wine again. It's a very different kind of style drink that kind of works very well. And looking at all these different kinds of ingredients. Who liked that one? I love that one. Huh? Sorry? What does it do to a drink? It just gives it an earthiness, a basey kind of dryness to it. A slight mustiness. You can get that slight musty note in a wine, and you can just add that. But if you add it back to honey as well, it just literally expands the flavours. But if you think about how tequila works and the structure of tequila works, and you're adding that to tequila, it's almost like if you add citrus to tequila, it pulls it up that way. But if you add kind of pollen, you're grounding it a bit more.
Basically, if you put
Yes. Did you hear that? So if you put both, you stretch the drink in both ways. Does that make sense? So if you were to add citrus on top of the tequila, it drags it up that way. If you add pollen and honey, it drags it down the other way. So you've got a wider spectrum. So again, looking at what this chap just said, you know, you're creating lots and lots of different layers that your brain registers. You know, you don't necessarily need to kind of, you know, go, oh, I know what that is, because sometimes you don't know what it is and you can't detect how certain things work, as with the effects, like the grape tannins, but your brain will register it. There's two ways of actually kind of registering flavour, and we were quite naughty back in the days when we were back at Isola. And what we did is we got this really cheap lychee juice. And what we did is we put something like 10 microns of a mint essential oil into this very cheap lychee juice. We then made a drink with it. And what we did is we charted the two different, the same drink with the mint essential oil and without it over a long period of time. It was about 6 months. And every time we served the drink that had been made with the lychee with the essential oil in it, the repeat sales would go right up. The weeks that we didn't do it, they would just stabilise and go like that. So even though it was a really popular drink, what it showed was that even though you couldn't taste mint, it made the juice taste fresher and it registered in your brain. So it's a substrata flavour. So it's below what your palate can actually register as a flavour. You have superstrata, which is what you register and what you can actually say, that's that, that's that, that's that. So by doing that, you can actually, you know, change the way people perceive crappy juice. It's fun. And it's done all over in the industry as well. There's loads of ingredients out there that people use that you don't necessarily know about. It's only kind of when you start, like, I read like the backs of toothpastes, you know, things, just because I'm interested in what's going on in there. And then I order the chemicals from it just to see what they actually are. And there was one really interesting one in toothpaste, which is just called Fresh 84 or something like that. It's its chemical name. And it was invented by a company. And unfortunately, I don't have any more of it. But if you were to taste it, it doesn't taste of anything. It doesn't smell of anything at all. But when I used to give it to people, like in groups like this, everyone would say mint. But there's no mint smell there. There's absolutely nothing there. But your brain just registers, because what the chemical actually does is drop the temperature of your tongue for you to automatically associate it with mint. It's like a hallucination. It's incredible. And when you actually tell people like that and they go back to it, they're like, oh, there's not really any smell. You really just hallucinate it. And they use that in toothpaste. They don't necessarily tell you. It's under different names. Fun if you can get hold of it and freak people out. Okay, this is a hydrosol. Can someone help me give these out again? Sorry. Someone's smoking the ambergris. We can pass these. Yeah. Hydrosols. Cool, thanks dudes. Yeah, it's like sweatiness. If you add ambergris to a rose, the rose just literally goes from something that's kind of sensual to something that's explicitly sensual.
How do you work in a cocktail? How do you work this in a cocktail?
What we do is we make a maceration, either in like kind of pure alcohol, stuff like that, yeah. Either that or we've made it with, like crushed it in, like literally powdered it in and let it settle with the cognac. Okay, this is a hydrosol. I love hydrosols for the simple reason that when I first discovered them years ago, you know, I'd been very, very frustrated for years that I couldn't get essential oils in things without adding them to alcohol first to break down the oil molecules to then add to, you know, my drink. And what often happened is the minute you added it to the drink, the oil coagulated again and you got this film of oil on top of your drink, which is a real pain and disrupts the whole, you know, arena of the drink, because you get this one set of flavors that are very, very potent, because essential oils usually are, you know, breaking that drink down. To finding something like this, which is a water-based essential oil in essence, excuse the pun. So what this is lavender, and what they do is they distill the oils through with water. The water suspends the oils in tiny, tiny, tiny little particles, and you basically get a flavored water. You can make these really easily. You like? TS. Yeah, it's a new one actually. So, you know, you can add that directly to a drink. You can add it to a bottle before you use it in the drink. With all of these ingredients, what I would suggest though, because some of them can be quite strong and potent, is to measure them very, very, very carefully. Because there's nothing worse than getting like a mouthful of, you know, a hydrosol or essential oil or an ingredient, and then not being able to get that flavour out of your mouth for the rest of your drink experience. And that's, you don't really want that for your guest. Cool. Cool, get these out. So what I'm sending out now is, you know, for me it's not a particularly kind of, you know, esoteric ingredient, but it is for a lot of people. If we could pass that back, that'd be great, thank you. Sochu, I mean, I had a long association with when I was working at Rocker, but what I think is important, and I suppose what, you know, I'm trying to tie together now between all the ingredients that I've showed you, is how important it is to look outside of our thinking box. You know, the idea that you know, would make the same drinks ad infinitum for the next kind of 20 years is a bit scary. You know, there's one of the things I always thought as a young bartender: do I want to make martinis Manhattans exactly the same way of making them now as I am, you know, as I will be in 20 years' time? Yeah, the basics of, yeah, fine, but, you know, what else can I bring to the party? You know, we are creative people. We are, you know, an evolving part of the culture, and we're at the crux of a very important period, I think, in food and drink at the moment. And what's really interesting is how far this is spreading and how interesting the dialogue is between food, drink, you know, people who make these hydrosols, distillers that aren't necessarily distillers that we're used to, you know, and they're outside, and all these new ingredients coming in can only reinforce what we do as creative people, which I think is essential for any, you know, any discipline to move forward and really kind of, you know, renovate itself to become, you know, something that it's not been and become stale. So with Sochu's an interesting one for me, because I love the way I can now use something that was pretty bad back in the old days. It was a bit like grappa, and has now become more and more refined, and using this in cocktails that, you know, I would usually use other spirits in, and reworking and learning back from that of how I feel about the cocktails in the first place. You know, like when you make, say, for example, what's a good example? Okay, a Caipirinha and a Capirosca, yeah? It's the same thing, but it changes completely what that drink is. And I think by using different ingredients, be they spirits, be they whatever, it puts you, puts the drink in a different perspective that you can learn from. That you can actually say, did I know that about that drink it didn't react like that in that way in its original form, but it reacts like that. And it's kind of looking at the differences in a quite methodical way and saying, well, if I've learnt that between the difference between those two, what happens if I take that further? And I think that is one of the big questions that we always ask ourselves at 69 and at Drink Factory, and that's how we learn stuff. Safety is always important. The idea that you would go out and say, right, I'm going to mess around with quinine and I'm going to make my own tonic is a great idea, but you need to know the levels of quinine poisoning, because without that, you're going to poison your customer. Do you want to do that? It won't be a busy bar. Maybe you do if you don't like the owner of the bar. I suppose it makes sense. But all of these ingredients have reference points on the internet. We live in a period now where there's so much information out there. If you find an ingredient that's really, really interesting, or not that interesting, or just interesting to you, or just an ingredient, look it up on the internet. There are website after website after website that will give you the oral toxicity levels of any ingredient on the planet, or any chemical on the planet. Without that, if you're playing around with these ingredients that, you don't know that much about, even that will go to the FDA sites. It's an American, they basically ban everything in America. They really do. They've just banned oak moss. So every perfume house in the whole of the world is just freaking out because oak moss is used extensively in perfume, and it's one of the most expensive things to reproduce. Check out these ingredients. Oral toxicity. Be careful if it's something you really don't know, or you find in some, backwater town in, somewhere, and you really like it there. Just check, because also there are cultural differences that people build up tolerances to ingredients in different places. So even though you're on holiday in that beautiful little island in the middle of nowhere and you're trying this wonderful ingredient and everyone's drinking loads of it, still be careful. Cool. A lot of the time what we try and do is, and I think this is super important, is build up libraries of flavour and scent. Scent is very important, I think, because it affects flavour so much. And I probably learnt more from scent than I have from flavour, just because there was more information out there over the past 15 years on scent than there was flavour. It's only now that you're really starting to get some really good info on flavour and actually how flavour works, because no one really knew for a long time. And to build libraries up of flavour, we incessantly take notes on everything we taste. There are days when we literally buy every single coconut water that we can possibly find and do tasting notes for coconut water, which is pretty damn boring. But, what you start to notice is that thing between the drinks, is the nuances between each of the coconut waters. And that builds up a mental library that, even though sometimes you don't realise you're doing it, 10 years down the line, there's ingredients I literally tasted 10 years ago that are in there somewhere, and then all of a sudden I'm making a drink or trying to make a drink and I'm stuck and there's a missing ingredient, and all of a sudden I go, well, why don't I use that? And it comes back to you. So taste, and then taste some more. And then when you finish tasting, taste again. Super important. And not just spirits. I mean, I think a lot of the time, we get a little bamboozled by the fact that there's all these wonderful people out there kind of selling us wonderful products. But I think also we need to look at what's outside of that, because if we just get stuck in that arena, we just get stuck in that arena. I think there's far much more to offer in that arena in conjunction with. Sourcing. Where do I find these things? Where do I get them from? The internet. Anything can be bought and found on the internet. Years ago, when I was trying to find ambergris, it was like, I don't know, walking around Hyde Park with a blindfold on and trying to find someone. It was that insane trying to find it. I used to write letters to people. I'm giving you an idea of how old I am. But I literally used to write letters to people and ask them, you know, have you heard of? Can you possibly tell me where you got that from? You know, I think nowadays you can literally just go, right, you will find someone that sells whatever ingredient you want. There's some really great websites, both in the UK for stuff. I mean, the pollen comes from a company called MSK that's based in Sheffield. You've got Wild Harvest, which is a fantastic company. MSK will probably source stuff for you. It's not cheap, but they do get really high quality product. But there are people out there that will find things for you nowadays. Inspiration. Really old cookbooks, cocktail books, always good. Not necessarily cocktail books, drink books I find more interesting because, you know, who's read Jerry Thomas? Put their hand up. There's quite a lot of us, isn't it? So if we're all reading Jerry Thomas, we all have a similar base of Jerry Thomas, which is great because we get a level of communication. But then what's outside? You know, the more obscure the book, the rarer the book. There's some amazing, we've got the British Library, which is one of the best food sections in the world. You know, and there are these places that you can find these really esoteric books that have different ways of looking at how flavour works in these ingredients. There's the, if you're lucky enough, there's the food library in Hampton Court. That's a bit harder to access, but some of their stuff is online. If you can get titles of stuff, there are people who actually kind of will send you photocopies as well of weird books. Other inspiration comes from people like a dear friend of mine, Bernard Lahouse, who runs foodpairing.be, which is a food pairing site. And what he does is he breaks down all the chemical structures of ingredients, both kind of esoteric and more well-known, and puts them on a chart that will show you what goes with what by chemical linking. So if you have a couple ingredients that go together, more than likely they'll have quite a big chemical overlap. Even though that theory is being disputed at the moment, it works. Any more? Questions? Cool. Hold on, 1 second. No, we've got it because no one can hear you. Instinct? Yeah. Yeah. Instinct. Instinct is everything. You can't do anything without instinct. It's impossible. You can have all these theories, you can have all the chemical knowledge in the world, you can talk to every scientist in the world. It's the only thing that's going to tell you it's right. That and then that. But if it doesn't taste right there, that tells you it's not right. Sorry? Some love. What?
I mean, I know this business and we all need to make money and we all live for that and we
Yeah.
make work for everybody, but if you don't have love for it, then
Yeah, that's impossible. There's only love, death and sex in between.
it's not working.
Yeah, that's why we put ambergris in our drinks. Any other questions? What's my favourite drink? The obvious answer is the one I've got in my hand, but usually, I mean, people ask me that and it's usually what I'm working on. For example, when we were working on the Lime Plus Plus, all I drank was lime drinks and tasted lime. And, you know, I would taste lime from really horrible sweets to different kinds of limes that I was getting from different places to lime essential oils. And that's what I was drinking. And I was trying all the different permutations of that. At the moment, what we've been drinking is the young wines and the mastic and the bee pollen and stuff like that. So that's the flavour range that I'm tasting at the moment. Apart from that, gin martinis.
Do you serve food with your drinks?
But
No, whether you serve food as well with your drinks.
I do. but I also find it very problematic. Of all the food cocktail pairings I've ever been to, and I've been to a hell of a lot, can honestly say that 3 have ever worked in a really good way. They're very difficult. I think the approach has to be small, lighter, less ABV, and taste the food first, and then work with the chef. Because most of the ones I've tasted is like, you get given the recipe, the bartender makes a drink from the recipe without tasting the food, and it's just a disaster. And then the drinks are really big, they're too acidic, they're too sweet, and they just ruin the meal. I think there's a new way of looking at it, and I think there's some people that are doing it in a very interesting way. I went to a food pairing at Grant Ashritz's new restaurant on Saturday. I don't know if you know about this place, the Avery, that's opened in Chicago. It's very interesting. He's one of the top chefs in the States. But what he did was really interesting. He did pairings that were not only alcoholic, were non-alcoholic, which I think is a great way to look at it. But the alcohol content in a lot of the drinks is very low. And I think that's a good start. Because if you've ever been to, a food pairing and you've got like a martini drink after another martini drink, by the third course, you don't want to eat anything. You just want to go and dance. Also, savoury drinks. Savoury drinks is one of my biggest loves. I don't think there's enough savoury drinks in the world. And to go savoury, definitely. Which 3? One Audrey Saunders did. Ooh, say it again so everyone can hear, otherwise it's a bit. Yeah. The one at El Bulli, the one at the weekend, and one Audrey Saunders did in New Orleans.
Not one you get too easily.
Huh?
Not one you get too easily.
No, afraid not, sorry. Any more questions? Yes. Can we give you that so that everyone can hear? Yeah. Premium and aged spirits. Why versus? Sorry? Don't know. I don't think there's an either or. I think there's that's positive and that's positive. They don't need to clash. There's enough space in this room with all the things that you guys do, and girls do, sorry, to have enough love for all the different things that we do. I think when Brian was a young lad, and when we first started, it was very difficult because our customers did not understand what we were doing. You should try this vodka. Yeah, but that's another £1 more expensive. I want the cheap stuff because it's going to get me really pissed. Okay, try this drink. No, I want a French martini, but you just had 20 French martinis. Why don't you try something different? No, I don't want to. I want to get drunk on that. It was very narrow. And it was only people like Dick Bradshaw, Dowd Groff, who started opening up the boundaries for the next generation. And the next generation opened up that boundary a bit more, educate the customer, and it's still opening, and it's still opening. So to say either or, I wouldn't. It's yes and yes. Cool. Maybe I should wrap this up. Any more burning questions, and then we finish up? No? Okay, thank you very much for putting up with me. Cool.